Welcome, everybody, to episode 21 of the Community Cloudcast. I'm your host, Eric Shupps, joined by my fellow host, Mr. Paul McCollum.
Hello there.
And our special guest this month, Christina Wheeler.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful to have you on here. We've done 21 episodes, and we're just getting around to all of our lady speakers. So it's
Nice.
that's our fault. We are correcting that.
It's all good. All good.
This year. Make sure we get all the great ladies in our community on board, because people are definitely tired of looking at me, Paul, and Jason. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think we got complaints before our first episode aired.
Yeah. For those of you who've been kind of following along, we have a couple of new series that we've added to the mix. We'll talk about those at the end. This is the episode that airs every third Thursday of the month on our YouTube and our Facebook channels, talking about all things in general cloud related. And Paul, I have a slide later for your new series that we will talk about that is premiering next week, as a matter of fact.
Excellent. Thank you.
On this channel. So pretty soon we'll have new content every week for everybody. I'm not sure what we're going to do in the first week of the month. Maybe we'll just sit here and stare at the camera.
Ooh, I like it.
And as I mentioned, our special guest this month is the one and only Christina Wheeler, now with Microsoft. Boy, that was weird to type on this slide.
Was it? I know.
So Christina and I have known each other for a very long time. Most people probably figured out a lot of our guests that come on. We've been around this community for quite some time and go way back. I even wore an old school shirt just for Christina.
That makes my day.
This one, going back to the old. This was Vegas, right? 2010?
That was Vegas 2010, or was it 2010? Or
yeah, I think this was the 2009. This would have been.
Oh, that was 2009. That was a 9.
Yeah.
Wow, we're getting old.
Yeah, going way back. But Christina, you've actually just joined Microsoft recently, within the last year. So bring us up to speed, because before that you were doing some consulting, done some independent stuff. You've had quite the journey.
I have. So I was independent for a decade, and then I joined Canvas. Like COVID happened, our world turned into the Twilight Zone. And then I went and joined Todd Baginski's team, which I love Todd. I joined Canvas, worked at Canvas for 2 years, and which was a great experience. Then I moved on to Core BTS, became a director of innovation. Wasn't there long, because I'll tell you what, I had this technical specialist opportunity come up at Microsoft, where I was referred in, and it was just such a great opportunity and such a perfect fit for me. So I took this opportunity and started on Halloween, October 31st, last year, 2022. So I've been in this role since then, and I absolutely love it. So I'm a senior technical specialist for business applications in the financial services industry. So my focus is, it's a pre-sales role. My focus is, my primary focus is insurance, but I also support banking and capital markets. Okay. And so what I do is, what I've been doing actually all day today, I've been leading sessions for some of our customers to help educate them on the Power Platform. I also do sessions where I'm assisting in the COE installation, as well as doing MTC sessions and really helping customers understand the Power Platform, but addressing things and helping them figure out, doing envisioning sessions, what are your use cases that you need to address. Actually, this transition to Microsoft's been an easy one for me, because back in 2021, when I was working for Todd, he put me in a VDASH role at Microsoft, where I was working under business applications. I was working in engineering, where I was running the Power Automate RPA partner program. And so that's when I got introduced into RPA and learned Power Automate Desktop, and learned, that was actually great, because it opened up this whole other side of building automation for solutions where you might have to tie into something where there's no cloud API. So I've really gone down this journey. Which is interesting, though, is I was doing a lot of Power BI stuff, but when I got into this role where I was running the RPA partner program, I completely shifted to Power Apps, Power Automate, RPA, and then now I support Power Virtual Agents as well as Power Pages. So I'm on that whole side of the stack. And I've been a longtime solution architect. I love building solutions. So the best part about this role is I get to do everything I love, but I do not have to write a ROM nor a statement of work. And that is just beautiful.
Nice.
So I'm doing everything I love, minus the things that I don't love to do. So it's great. It's the perfect role.
How did you get no SOW writing in your writer?
quite a change from, you were hands-on in the past, right? Delivering solutions for clients and
I was.
being right in the middle of making it happen. And so this is a little bit of a change where you're showing them how to make it happen, but you're not actually the one going and building.
Well, I'm still building POCs and I'm building demos. So I build POCs and I'll package it up as a solution and give it to them. I'm not allowed to touch their
Okay.
environment. That's one thing that was a shift for me. But that was a shift for me when I was in the VDash role, because I was like, oh yeah, just let's create a login for me so I can do this for you. And I'm like, oh wait, no, I can't do that. So I'm not allowed to touch their environments. They can share their screen and I can direct them and stuff. But what I'll do is I'll start building solutions in my own demo tenant, build solutions for them, maybe start a POC, and then I'll give it to them and show them how to deploy it. Right. So I'm still doing some hands-on stuff, but I'm doing it more from a, pilot POC perspective, which I'm cool with that because I love doing that. But I'm not building full end-to-end solutions now like I did in consulting. Unless, if I want to do that, then I can go maybe, explore being a CSA, cloud solution architect or something. But I'll be honest, I love this role. It's a perfect fit. I couldn't have asked for a better role. And I'm happier than I've ever been in my career.
Well, that's excellent. Of course, the downside is that we lost you as an MVP and you went over to the dark side like so many do. And so we thin the ranks of good folks who've been around. There aren't a whole lot of us old timers left, to be honest.
That's true. Well, that's true.
But fortunately, it's not as obvious with you as it is with me about how long I've been around this game.
I don't know. I need to, I still dye my roots, which it's going to tell you it's about time again. So.
Yeah, must be rough. Having stuff.
I love it.
Oh, you're getting there, buddy. You're getting there.
Yeah, no,
you're not hiding it.
This is a canvas. This is going colored at the next event. I'm going to take advantage of that.
No, you guys look great with gray. Women, for us, we just look old. So
I don't know. I don't feel.
Yeah.
So
I think men look distinguished, and I love that. You look distinguished.
I'm gonna start using that then.
Yeah, that's good.
This is distinguished, not old.
Yeah, my wife uses that as a curse word. It's for me as well. Just whenever I'm being cute or adorable.
Yeah, that's cute, Paul.
Yeah.
I know.
Distinguished, old, cute, dumb. Yeah, adorable, also dumb.
A big thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Aptigent. New Power Tools release came out in January, so a lot of new actions on the Power Platform, which I know makes Christina giggle, as she said, I would never do. Shupps, you'll never do any of this Power Platform stuff. And look, here we are as an ISV.
Yep, exactly.
Go figure, right?
Never say never. Never say never. That's the one thing I learned in my career, in my life.
Never. And we do a bunch of cloud content. So go figure that. Not only am I not doing on-prem, I'm doing Power Platform. I'm
in shock. I never thought I'd see the day that you would do that, ever.
I know. It's like it's just not me anymore. So what we thought we'd do in this particular episode is kind of elevate things a little bit, talk about business applications as a whole and how that's changed over time, where we've seen things transition from our experience of doing things in the old SharePoint days and other platforms, as well to this new environment that we're all working in, kind of regardless of platform. A lot of these concepts apply across multiple platforms. And of course, Christina, this is really where your bread and butter is these days. So let's dial it back a little bit to begin with and take the clock back a little ways. And let's talk about where things were in the past. So when you and I both got into this game, and Paul as well, when we talked about building a business application inside of a collaborative space, we were doing web parts in SharePoint, right? We were doing custom pages and lots of custom code and all the issues that go along with that. And the barrier to entry was exceptionally high. Like you couldn't just step in and do this stuff. There was a huge learning curve.
Yep, there was. And actually, I also came from the on-prem. I mean, you and I both came from on-prem, and I did a lot of farm-based solutions. I wrote timer jobs. One of the things I loved building back then was event receivers. I hated at the time, SharePoint Designer workflows were limited, and then the Visual Studio workflows I absolutely hated at that time. So it was easier. Let me just write an event receiver to do something, right? And so I wrote a lot of that. And then the cloud came out, and I was actually very hesitant with the cloud. I came from BPOS. as my own personal environment before it became Office 365. And then I got into some hybrid implementations. And this is when I was dealing with search solutions a lot. And this is when I realized at the time, Office 365 was not enterprise ready. I don't even remember what year that was, but I'm like, it is not ready. Because I remember working on a project and a customer said, we want 70% in the cloud, 30% on-prem. I said, no, you have to flip those numbers. They said, why? I said, because it's not ready. So I proved it out. I implemented some stuff for them and we proved out that it really was the ratio that I told them they need to flip. And then I steered away from cloud projects for over a year. I didn't want anything to do with them. I wanted to strictly stay on-prem. I didn't want anything to do with it. And then Power BI is actually what brought me back to the cloud. So then I started getting back into data analytics. I used to be a SQL DBA, so I'm real strong on data. I did business objects, crystal reports, stuff like that, way before SharePoint. And so I started getting into Power BI stuff and I loved it. And so that's what brought me back to the cloud. And then that's when I saw how much has improved in Office 365. And then I started getting involved in SharePoint Online. I used to teach SharePoint, but I stopped at one point because I was starting to teach online. And that was when you had the switch between modern and classic. And I was like, I can't teach this because it's so confusing for you, my students, right? Well, why is this classic? Why is this modern? And I'm like, I'm done. But then I shifted to teaching Power BI, and then I got involved in the Power Platform Suite. So that was just, you see the shift in technology. But you look at SharePoint in the beginning, right? In my opinion, in the beginning, I couldn't stand the product. I thought it was terrible, and I'm being honest here, right? Because any beginning of a product, it's a nice idea, but it's like, wow, I was a .NET developer. So I came from being a .NET developer to being thrown into SharePoint in the beginning. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, how come I can't do all these things? Then I started developing code, and then I was still frustrated, but then I embraced it. Once it became MOS 2007, I'm like, oh no, this is great. Built off the .NET architecture, I can use pages and page layouts. I'm like, okay, now I can embrace this. And that's when I started writing event receivers and stuff. Then when I got to the cloud, I'll tell you, I shifted at one point because you and I were SharePoint for a long time, right? But there was a point that I shifted where I actually made SharePoint my backend data source for a while. And then, yeah, I know, you can cringe. I admit to that. I was guilty of that, and so were many of our other MVPs.
We were. That was a pattern. We were all guilty of that.
It was a pattern.
With the Kerberos stuff, and you couldn't. Yeah, you at least had to use the SQL Server for data at the minimum if you weren't actually throwing stuff into SharePoint proper.
Oh yeah. I don't do that now. I mean, I even have slides where I talk about use cases, SharePoint versus Dataverse and stuff. But I'll tell you, I've completely shifted. I mean, I've shifted even on the Power Platform side. I'm building a lot more model-driven apps now than I am Canvas apps. But I have different use cases. I think there's a combination of using both. And I'm enjoying that. I'm building solutions internally for my team at Microsoft, which has been great use cases for me to share with customers as well, saying, look, here's a use case here. If I want to have data that's inputted, I'm going to create a Canvas app. But if I want to manage the back-end process of this, I'm going to build the model-driven app. But both of them I'm tying into Dataverse. So I'm shifted. I'm not using SharePoint lists unless my boss tells me to.
Nice. The day that I had to take out of my toolbox and throw aside XP command shell from SQL was a super sad day. So I'm definitely there with you on that. Oh, it's not ready yet because I have to use. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I remember those. Yeah, all those sad going away parties, like for my comb and for all those other on-premises tools that just had no purpose anymore, couldn't be used.
Yeah, what else did we use? We used STS ADM, right? What else did we use back then?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And yeah, if you were talking about SharePoint prior to 2010, you're right. It was not that was interesting. It could still do stuff, but man, every time you wanted to stretch it, it was work.
Well, it's a great point you make, though, in talking about cloud readiness, because there was a period of time from, let's call it 2016 through 2019, really. Sure. Maybe late 2018, maybe going back to, I forget when BPOS came out, but there's certainly a period of time, probably let's call it 2015 to 2019, where the cloud was there, it was available, the tool set was very limited. Right?
2015, Eric? Or do you mean? Were you talking 2015 or 2006?
No, really, where the transition started to the cloud was from a SharePoint perspective, was the post 2013 wave, right? So after 2013 is when things started to shift to the cloud, where we really started to see SharePoint Online as a robust enough offering that you could use it for most of the base use cases. But the tool set was still very limited. Automation was a problem.
Yep.
There was a box around things we relied on, like search and other aspects that we couldn't control, right?
Yep.
And so there was difficulty in utilizing that tool set in the cloud to actually create business applications because of those limitations. As we progressed over time, that line that was once very stark, right? If you want to do customized solutions, you have to stay on prem, right? Or at a minimum, have some level of hybrid. If you just want to use it vanilla out of the box, you can go to the cloud, right? If you
Yep.
tick all these certain things that you're willing to give up. Fast forward a few years and the incredible pace of change, and look where we are now, where the toolbox in the cloud eclipses in many ways what we had on prem. There's still a lot of limitations, right? The whole modern piece,
Yep.
speaking from a SharePoint perspective, is taking a long time to catch up what we could do on prem. We
Yep.
still don't have proper page layouts. We still don't have
Agreed.
effective integration of modern capabilities with the old stuff. Don't even get me started on ECM. So there's a lot of pieces missing that we relied on, but the tool set has become so much more robust to the point that SharePoint now isn't where we go and do stuff that we work with everything else. It's just
Right.
one of the things we work with as part of an overall solution. And that's a huge change.
It is. Yeah, absolutely agree.
So when you're working with customers, and I'm going to assume you probably work with mostly larger enterprises, as we all do, really. How do you help them envision that tool set coming from either where they were on-prem, or maybe even coming from a different environment and they're new to this whole thing? How do you help them put those puzzle pieces together?
Well, this is where I've been doing envisioning sessions or MTC sessions with customers, because we're looking at where are they at now, and we look at a couple of things. What are they using now? Where are they at? Where are they at on the Microsoft journey side, and where do they want to go? Also look at what are third-party products. I do showing a lot of integration between Salesforce and ServiceNow, which I think is beautiful with the Power Platform, right? Because our customers aren't going to be 100% on the Microsoft stack. I actually came prior to joining Microsoft. I was strictly Salesforce in the where I worked, but I love being able to know how to tie that all in together. It doesn't matter if you're on Dynamics or Salesforce. Let's show you how to build your solution to tie into that. What I'm finding, especially in the insurance and financial services space, is there's so much manual processes that are still being done, or they're still in some organizations that are still on-prem with SharePoint, and they're just now getting into SharePoint Online and Teams and all of that stuff. And I have to remember, not every organization moves as quick as we do. And shockingly, there's some that are still on Lotus Notes. Yeah, I'm learning that recently. There are some organizations that are still on Lotus Notes. But the thing is that what I look at is, you see, we've got this whole digital transformation journey now, where it's bringing all these products together, from Microsoft products to third-party products and so on. And it's really helping the customers figure out what they have and where they need to go, and where does Microsoft fit into that, and how can Microsoft help you with that journey. And that's what I've been doing, which I love doing.
One of the themes we talk about here all the time is this whole multi-cloud
Sure.
concept, of where it's very unusual, especially in a large enterprise, that you're going to work in one single cloud stack. You're almost certainly going to
Yep.
work in others, which is why we do this the way that we do. So, because Paul works mostly on the Salesforce side, of course, I'm still mostly on the Microsoft side, but we do things in Salesforce as well. And it beyond just learning what are the capabilities of the primary cloud you're using, say for your collaborative space or whatever, you now, when you're solutioning, you also have to take into account integration surfaces with the other cloud properties that the customer is using. And that's expanding, not consolidating. From what I'm seeing, there's more and more and more cloud services plugging in every day.
There is. Well, and that's why I think, at least on the Power Platform side, you're seeing, I think when we started, you only had like 100 or so connectors, and now there's over 800 connectors. I stopped counting. I have no idea how many connectors there are, but it
We're
keeps
very
growing.
close to 1,000. If we haven't eclipsed
I had
1,000
a
by
feeling.
now.
I thought so. I figured that. Right. And then you have, you can build a custom API, but I try to see, is there, an API available now? And that's why I think a lot of these third-party products are now saying, hey, what's this Power Platform stuff? Oh, people need to integrate. Let's build a connector for them that they can use. I had a use case where, yes, there's things you can do in Salesforce and ServiceNow. You can build workflows and stuff. But I had a use case with one customer where they're using ServiceNow, and this team is actually monitoring a shared mailbox, manually monitoring. They'll get these Azure emails that come in based on issues, and they'll manually create a ticket in ServiceNow. But what was happening was their ServiceNow development team is working on a solution to automate. However, they've been working on it since last year, which tells me it might not be so easy to do on the ServiceNow side. So this is where I said, wait a minute, I can help you. And I did. I trained them on the fly. We built a solution. I did it in my dev environment. I have a dev ServiceNow instance. I have a dev Office 365 tenant, and I got them hands-on. I said, let's build out your use case. So I said, all right, let me create a shared mailbox. And I did that. And then I said, let's build a flow to manage that. Let's feed some, Azure alerts into it, and let's monitor that. And then I showed them how we can extract the body of that email and then automatically create a ServiceNow ticket. And they loved it. And they had a working solution by the end of the day. Actually, I did the session with them in 2 hours. And I said, look, you don't even have to, your ServiceNow dev team doesn't have to do anything. You have now a solution. So, and I'm finding even things like that with Salesforce. Another scenarios. Not everybody, like the last org I worked at, not everybody had a Salesforce access, but they needed to see Salesforce data. So I used Power BI to surface the data for reports. But then I also did things where I built a Power App and used Power Automate to pull things in. So maybe pull things in from Salesforce or right back to Salesforce. So I didn't have to worry that they didn't have access. I actually used a service account for that connection to pull those records, right? So you have these different use cases, but you're right. You have this full-blown integration with different products that you need to be able to do. But I look at what do you need to accomplish and what's the easiest way to get there.
Well, I think the vendors themselves are recognizing this. I mean, the API space on Salesforce, Paul, is enormous across all the multiple clouds that they support. And it's, of course, because Salesforce grew up as a cloud-driven app from the basics. So, from the very beginning, so they had a bit of a head start around all this. But the integration surfaces in Salesforce are almost innumerable.
Yep.
And so I think we're not only are we seeing customers start to think outside of the cloud. I'm going to coin that term right now, outside of the cloud. That's mine. They're thinking outside of the single cloud that they're in, right, into multiple cloud connections. But all of the vendors are now thinking about API spaces. As an ISV provider that connects to all these systems. I mean, we're on Zapier and Salesforce, IBM and Mintex and Microsoft and all these plugins. When I look at a provider who doesn't have that capability, I'm like, what year are you living in? Right? Why don't you have an open API? Why don't you have a connector? Why don't you have the ability to do these plugins? If you want customers to build solutions with their product, this is the way things stand right now. You have to be able to do that interconnectivity because that's part of solution design.
Yeah, connectivity and then security standards come up a lot too. I was just writing a post about one of the things that kept driving me away from being able to use on-premises solutions is because the integration pieces or the authentication protocols weren't kept up on-prem. Stuff that works just fine with a standard service account with two east-west systems talking unsecured isn't even remotely acceptable with any of the cloud systems. And so you've got to, if you haven't been playing keep along or keep up with the Johnsons on your integrations, you can't integrate to the cloud. You can't, and all of the modern services, you have to, okay, well, if we still need to use application X, we've got to go buy the hosted version. Otherwise, it'll take us 6 months to upgrade and convert our version. And then all those systems that it works with, convert them to use the new version of the interconnect. And that has driven a lot of things a long way, especially if I live out of Salesforce, so Salesforce is the given. Everything else has to keep up with whatever Salesforce has given as the minimum bar for connecting and talking to that service. And that causes a lot of ripples and a lot of upgrades and requirements. So
Christina, one of the very different things about your role would be the fact that you're not actually writing code anymore. And I always, as much as people think of me being a developer, and I am, but more of an architect these days, although I still sling a lot of code. You're not slinging any code these days. You miss it?
Well, hold on. There is this whole pro dev side to the Power Platform that I'm going to start teaching. So I'm going to start getting in, teaching people how to build PCF components and teaching them this whole fusion. I guess the term is fusion development now that they're calling it, but teaching how to extend, how to build custom connectors and stuff. So I'm going to start getting back into the dev side. Thankfully, I'll get my little dev fix. I'm also going to teach Power Effects. But I will tell you, I you would think I miss it, but I really don't. However, actually, I did have a need. I got excited because my boss needed something. So my manager needed something, and I thought, I said, I could just create a Power BI report for this, but I wasn't happy with the custom visuals. Well, Ted Pattison, I used to teach for him when he was at Critical Path before he joins Microsoft. And he taught me how to build custom visuals. I'm like, let me go build a custom visual. And I went digging to find some other visuals out there. And I was like, let me find one I could work with that I could hack up. Well, I was a little rusty. So I had to kind of reteach myself again on the Power BI side on the custom visuals, but I was loving it because I'm like, I'm getting back into code. This is exciting. However, shockingly not, I do a lot of advanced stuff with Power Apps. So I'm actually okay, believe it or not. You would think I would miss opening Visual Studio, but I don't. Shockingly, I don't. I'm still using Visual Studio Code. I had to do a Power Pages demo the other day, and I was, truth be told, I was getting frustrated with some of the limitations out of the box UI. I'm like, wait a minute, I have an option here to click edit in Visual Studio Code. So I clicked on that so I can just modify the UI and I could do some other things. So I'm getting my code fix there as well. So I'm working on the whole extensibility side on the pro code dev side with the Power Platform. I'm new to getting back into that, but I am getting into it. So it's giving me my custom development fix.
Well, I think some of that gets lost in the marketing messaging, right? It's all about no code, no code, no code, no code. But
this is why I cringe when they say no code. Keep going.
But first and foremost, if you're going to do anything beyond something really basic in Power Apps, you're doing a lot of expressions and you're basically doing coding, right? In Power Apps. But the marketing message is obviously driving in a different direction, but there is a tremendous surface out there we have a business that does just connectors, right? That's all we do, right? There's a ton of code on the back end, but there is a surface for doing that. You can open up your applications, and I've been teaching custom connectors for 3+ years now.
I love it.
To folks and opening their eyes on the things that they can do in integrating with other services. So just because it's not there out of the box doesn't mean you can't.
Exactly.
For example, if you want to do the connector for Salesforce, I talk about this all the time. Very limited. There's 30 actions in the connector for Salesforce that you can do. That's it. There's thousands of endpoints in Salesforce in the overall API, right? It's not even touching Marketing Cloud and all the other things that you can do in Salesforce. But that's okay because you can go build a custom connector for it, right? And in theory, you're not actually really writing any code. You're just writing a JSON spec that tells Power Platform or Power Automate how to connect to Salesforce, and all the APIs are already there.
So I have a question. For ServiceNow, I think out of the box connectors, you can't do SSO, so you have to do a custom connector for that. Is it the same for Salesforce if you want to do single sign-on?
There's no single sign-on, but just like Microsoft's Salesforce has the concept of both OAuth and API keys. So you can generate an API key in your instance. You can have your administrator generate that API key in the connector, which is technically when you use the create a new connection for Salesforce in Power Apps / Power Automate, you're doing an OAuth exchange between the two. But yes, that capability exists. But no, there is no concept of cross-cloud single sign-on, which, there's companies that make that their bread and butter, right? That's all the Oktas of the world and whatnot that, promise single sign-on between cloud platforms. But I think it's interesting that a few years ago, I was talking about custom connectors, and it was a limited audience that was listening because the idea that you needed to connect your multiple clouds together hadn't bubbled up to the surface. Now it was more of a push. Now it's a pull, right? People want to know more about that because they're evolving theirs solution. So I'm sure you see that when you're working with customers, you introduce them to the first little bit, and then they come back later and they go, "Oh, we've learned that. Now we want to learn all this other stuff we heard we can do."
Yep, it's exactly what's happening. Gosh, I would love to take your custom connector development class now. That would be awesome.
So this evolution that's happened in the Microsoft space has been an interesting journey for those of us who are very close to it, who come from on-prem and now it's in the cloud and whatnot. But Paul, from the Salesforce side, you have a slightly different perspective because in many ways you've actually watched us catching up to where in a space you've already been working in for years.
Yep, for sure. And sorry, I'm having a little bit of a, let's see. Oh, hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
Oh, okay, good.
We
sorry.
can.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting, and I switched at an interesting time. So the Microsoft stuff is definitely catching up to some of the stuff that Salesforce kind of started out with around the same time the cloud move started. So yeah, it's neat to start having those opportunities to link into the tried and trusted, Microsoft suite of tools and be able to leverage those in kind of cloud only and cloud first applications. I get a couple of stares from people that aren't as versed in the Microsoft. I don't know if you've seen this, Christina, that you're either Salesforce or Microsoft. You're not usually both, and
right.
Trying to bring up, can't we just talk to Teams? Why do we have to go to this third-party, fourth-party application?
Yep.
We already use it. That's already our main channel. Well, that's not what we don't talk to that system or to that cloud.
That is true. I'm here. I'm letting a dog out.
Oh, okay.
But that in my experience, that mindset is changing a bit. I think as people start to realize that big multi-cloud pillars in the organization are the norm now.
Right. Yep.
It does, but it still seems all of them are growing so fast. It's hard to keep up with all of the capabilities. If I didn't have these touch points with you, Eric, I don't get the regular. My world and my consultancy is primarily Salesforce, and I'm force fed new ideas and new apps going on in that stack, and then I have to kind of do social to go get. To get the Microsoft piece and go, hey, isn't this now available in Azure? Don't we already use Azure? Couldn't we just talk to that? That's to be able to pull those best of breeds across silos is a really interesting job for a multi-cloud architect. But keeping up with that learning, I'd love to hear what you do, Christina, to stay abreast of that. And especially you've got to be mostly in Microsoft's world now, and as we all lived there together before, but I don't, and I never got quite hooked into that pipeline. What do you do to keep up with all of the other clouds and Amazon as well?
Yeah, good question. What I keep up to date with is what the majority of the customers are using. That's kind of what it is. Like why I should know before I joined Microsoft, I had customers that were strong on the AWS side. So I got stronger on that. But now that I'm not really dealing with AWS customers that really aren't in AWS much at all, I'm not keeping up with it as much. But Salesforce and ServiceNow, those are the two I'm keeping up with because those are the majority of what I'm dealing with. Or if I have another customer that are dealing with some other products, I'll make sure I stay up to speed with that. So I'm really tailoring it based upon what my current customers' platforms are, and that's kind of the way I'm doing it, because there's so much out there, so I have to there's only so much time in the day and so much that I can keep up with, so I'm doing it based on priority, based on customers.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it's so much of it you almost have to specialize in. Like there was a day when we were expected to know everything about SharePoint. Right?
Yeah, 1994.
But in the let's call it the 2010 wave, right? We, as the experts, quote unquote, were expected to know everything about the platform, right? And so we had to stay up on it. Now, what benefited us was that 3-year cycle of churn because we could learn and learn.
That's right. Right.
It was predictable, but Paul and I have had some interesting conversations where I'm talking to him about deep Salesforce stuff that I know because we have product integration on Salesforce. And he's going, yeah, okay, I didn't know. Okay, I'm going to have to go study up on that. He's a Salesforce expert, not me.
Yeah.
But there's so much capability now in these systems that you almost have to specialize in just, I do this slice, I do this slice with that side. That's got to be hard when customers are looking at you to tell us everything we need to know about Power Platform.
Oh yeah, I've had customers say that too.
And Eric, that was part of my philosophy when I first started following you around, was dev uncovers those new tidbits first, and you can understand them from that root level. And then everything else is capability branched off of that low-level technical capability that would get surfaced inside of code first. Even though I was always, an enterprise architect and, functionality and trying to learn that, but I always saw the pieces or the hints of those new functionalities start whenever you would go over them inside of something new that came out that was exposed through dev. And it's funny that we all have that dev background. I'm wondering, I always feel I should be going more to new dev things as opposed to just reading the Reader's Digest versions on the news lines. But I think that was always
the true subject matter expert has finally shown up on the.
He just attacked me.
Oh,
Did you see that?
he did not want to be on
He was
camera.
trying to attack this.
Yeah. Sorry,
He's
did
only
I
a
say
couple
developer
months-
too loud?
He's only a couple months old.
It's your accent, Paul.
Yeah. He's just like,
Christina, let's talk about this concept of a center of excellence, because you have a session coming up at European Collaboration Summit in Dusseldorf in May, where you're talking about that. And for years, we've tried to convince customers to do things like a SharePoint Center of Excellence and try and get them to take it seriously like they do on other platforms. And now you're talking about that for Power Platform. So tell us how that concept is going over and how is that being implemented in your customer?
so what I'm actually going to show, what I teach and what I show and what I help customers do is implement the Power. So the Power Cat team has developed a solution called the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. And what it is, it's a bunch of different Power Apps and flows, both Canvas and model-driven apps that helps you govern. The core components will help you govern your Power Platform environments. And so, because that was one of the challenges I see customers say, they said, how can we govern this? We're not going to turn this on because we want to be able to control this or see everything that we have. Well, out of the box, you can't just go like out of the box to the UI, right? Even in the admin center, you only can go to a certain level, and it depends on what your permissions are and so on, right? So the Center of Excellence Starter Kit gives you a way to get all these analytics where you can see all of the apps and flows that are in the environment. You can see the connectors that are used. You can the kitten is hungry. He's nibbling on my arm right now, letting me know he's hungry, by the way. So it's pretty funny. So going back to that, it gives you a starting point. Now there's the governance side of it, but then there's also other components you can install for nurturing, and as well as there's different elements of the COE starter kit, which that's what I'm going to talk about. But and show that kit and show how it can help you get started with all these different elements, including adoption. And you guys all just grayed out. I lost you guys. What happened there? Let's see.
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can see Elgato for Paul, and I just see the circle for you.
Yeah, it looks like our cameras just cut out here for some unknown reason. Paul is back.
Paul's back. Oh, now you're on mute, Paul.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, it looks like we may have lost Eric's.
Eric's coming back.
There we go.
There we go. Oh, now I see the green.
It lost sometimes on this platform. You see, now I'm the orange one again. It will lose the virtual background and it cuts out the camera when it does it.
What's happening? We're not using Teams.
There, you're not orange. Nice plug.
Also working mostly because we're not using Teams.
Right, exactly. Oh, good one. That's a good one.
So now everyone can see that I do in fact have a green screen behind me. But so there has to be a level of maturity, don't you think, in the customer's journey before they're ready to hear that message about having a center of excellence, or do you not agree?
Well, no, what I happen to do is actually, I think for anybody to start before they even turn stuff on for people is to get the COE starter kit installed. Get that installed and to have a governance strategy in place and help them understand what environments are, and basically do governance sessions with them so they can understand what are the security capabilities, what understanding how they can actually set up DLP policies in the admin center where they can control the different environments. So I say you need to actually have a foundational structure, and the COE starter kit should be one way to help get you there. Understanding it, getting that set up. So I think people should have this set up before they turn things on, right?
Okay.
Then what'll happen is then understanding governance and security, really, really key. Training the admins who are going to manage these Power Platform environments, teaching them all about the environments, what's the recommended best practice, teaching them how to set up a CI/CD pipeline for ALM. So, and teaching them about solutions, managed versus unmanaged solutions, and getting, have your makers deploy, develop in your dev environment. Then have a pipeline strategy, set up your pipelines, and you can even have some approval process on it, right? Have some process where you go through a code, a review of your Power Apps and your flows that you want to deploy, and then have a test staging environment. So now we're going back to our old school, right? Dev days, where you had a proper dev stage production. Now you can set that up with your environments in the Power Platform. So that's what I want to educate customers on. So that way they understand the Power Platform, understand the, what to have in place, and then decide what you want to gradually open up. So you might not want to open up everything to everybody at first and say, okay, let's start to have these champions in the Power Platform. We're going to have our makers, and then we'll roll it out to maybe IT first, and then we'll roll it out, right? Having a strategy. But every organization on their strategy is going to be different. So you figure out what's going to work best for each customer. Do not get on my laptop, please. Okay, keep going. I'm listening.
Do you think that starts to... Do we start to lose some of the value when we do that, perceived value by the business, because we're now talking about DevOps, right? They don't want to hear about DevOps. The business doesn't want to think about that kind of stuff. Those are all barriers to
I would say for enterprise customers. For the smaller customers, it depends. If you have customers that are very hesitant about it, extremely hesitant about the Power Platform, that's where I think their journey should be. But if you have other customers that are saying, let's go, we're ready to go, different story. Now, one thing I educate people on is use the default environment for personal productivity apps and flows, and rename it personal productivity. And then create your other environments for your actual production environment. Right?
Smart. I was just about to go there, because the big thing that I always hated, and I was about to ask if you saw this, are we teaching that discipline comes with all these easy to use drag and drop applications finally? Because we get different departments. Hey, I want to use it for personal productivity and play fast and loose.
Right.
But the IT department is like, no, we have to secure it. You can't have rights to make external connections and share with users. We have to lock that down for security and compliance. We need these 30 other applications that front all of these, whether you're GitHub or sharing or compliance testing or pen testing, where the rest of them we want to, deliver what was advertised, which was the easy drag and drop. Everybody can do it because you already have it. Is that messaging going out that it's an A or B, or you have to do what you just said of create two different environments and govern them separately?
Well, here's what I do. I give the recommendations, and then they have the decision to make, right? They can decide how they want to do. Then you have others that just, they just had the floodgates open. They have all these personal productivity apps, and they go, or they have all these apps, production apps in, the default environment. They go, wait a minute, now how do we scale? How do we govern this now? So you're getting a mix of organizations that are coming to you in different levels. Some that are brand new, ready to go. Some that are saying, we want to do this, but we want to have this in a controlled environment. So that's where I'm talking about CI/CD pipelines with Azure DevOps. Okay, then because you have, especially the insurance space, insurance and financial services. They're very strict, which I get it. They have regulations and all these different compliance and stuff. So in that case, it makes sense. But in other organizations, right? Okay, hey, let's let you, do this journey. But then the other ones where they said, oh my goodness, we had no idea people were creating these apps. So it's great, we're happy, but what do we do? How do we know what these apps are being used for? And that's what I said. Let's install the COE starter kit so you can see what you actually have in your environment. So you have different levels, and it's not a one size fits all, but my biggest thing is let's see what you got. Let's see what you have. So every organization is going to be different. But for me, for dealing with FSI customers, there's a lot more regulations and restrictions, and they're saying we don't want to open the floodgates. We really want to have this control. So that's why I said, all right, let's talk about governance and stuff, governance, so your cybersecurity can feel better about things. And so you guys, because they'll have to go through to get things approved before they're even going to allow certain connectors, right? So it just varies depending upon the organization, I would say. So,
do you think we're running a risk of making what promised to be the term I hate as much as you do, no code, but what promised to be like this user citizen development thing? Are we making it too complex for small and medium organizations? Are we throwing too much at them for them to effectively adopt this stuff? Now, let me maybe phrase that a different way. The evolution is inevitable. We have to service the enterprise. So we have to have all these control surfaces that we do in governance and CI/CD and all that stuff. So we have to have those things in order to make this enterprise capable. Coming back to your point of the cloud wasn't ready yet. Well, now we have these things, and so the cloud is ready. Are we putting a barrier though in front of small and medium customers?
You know where we're putting a barrier is with the pricing. Because small medium can't justify, even though they have premium use cases, they can't justify the cost.
Sure.
So then they'll say we want to stay within our seated licenses, and that's when they're looking at how, okay, we're just going to leverage SharePoint with our backend data source because we can't justify the cost. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm seeing. The enterprise customers, different story, right? But you look, we have incentives. If you have more than 2,000, if you have 2,000 or more PowerApps licensing, per user license, you get automatically public pricing, you get a 40% discount. Well, we don't have stuff like that for small to medium business because small to medium is not going to need 2,000 licenses, right?
Right.
So I see those challenges. And then the small to medium is not looking at having an Azure, an ADO pipeline, and they may not need that, right? Because they're small medium. They just say, we want our apps, we want them to work. But that challenge I have is with the premium features and the premium pricing. Some of them just can't justify that cost. So that's where I see the challenge for small to medium business.
Yeah, we hear it all the time. And on our side, we hear the premium connector license complaint all the time. We'd love to use your stuff, but we can't afford to pay for premium connectors, right?
Yep, that's what I get. So they're figuring out all these workarounds. And then that's when, and I hate to say it, but it's architecting around licensing versus architecting around best practice.
Yep. And that's all too common. I know it happens in the Salesforce space as well. Based on cost per transaction, the cost per documents, right? You're architecting around very expensive storage on the Salesforce side, something that frustrates me when trying to do all of our file related stuff because it's very cost prohibitive to do that.
Yep. You're jumping through a bunch of complexity hoops and adding a whole bunch of complexity to your ecosystem just to fit cost and those hiccups. And that's where you come back into that best practices and having to make architectural considerations based on price versus, exactly what you're saying. Yeah, that's a hard one. Money makes me sleepy. I just want to deal with Kafka and high speed and data and cubes, and do not talk to me about accounting and OpEx. And that's not an architectural principle. I can't point to a shorted out one of those when I'm troubleshooting.
Well, that's it. We're technical people, right? We like to solve problems, and that's a problem that's completely out of our grasp that we can't solve, right? And that's for that message needs to bubble up. And, Christina and I can speak from hard experience of trying to get that message to bubble up, and it just doesn't. It just bumps up against the ceiling, right? But the bean counter's got to count the beans. And so that's an intractable problem, I think. But are we getting to the point where the tooling is good enough that most of the common issues or use cases that we're running into in customers we can solve now?
Yes. If you asked me that a few years ago, I would have said no. It was a few years ago, I would have said no. But now I would say yes. I would say the other thing, even for these small to medium business ones, some of them are actually paying for some products that might be very expensive. And then what you can look at is go, you know what? Maybe we can build what you have there in the Power Platform. And if so, let's look at all the other solutions you need. And so if they can have, if you're going to have more than 2 solutions, it's already going to pay for itself. Right. But that's where, and looking at, maybe we can, some of them, because even the medium businesses, some of them are on these platforms that they would love to replace, but they haven't figured out how. Right. But that's where the Power Platform could be a good fit. But this is where I tell customers too, you can sign up for a developer in plan. Use a developer plan where you get to try out all the premium features. And so then do some POCing in that to see if this is going to be a good fit for you. Then you can make that decision. And then the cool thing about that is if you develop those solutions in your development environment in your tenant, and you do decide this is a good use cases, this is going to fit, okay, we want to go ahead and invest in premium licenses, then you could package up what you built in your dev environment through a solution and import it into your production environment, and you're ready to go.
But unless it uses custom connectors, we still have a little bit.
Well,
of a
unless you're using custom connectors, and if you're using SharePoint lists too, there you go.
So architecting against licensing, and Microsoft, I would say, was good middle of the pack of catching up to this a bit, where licensing actually worked out, gained some flexibility, and you could do partial licensing. We got where, and there was a lot of stuff where we had to talk, when we were trying to do beachhead implementations with a new technology, we had to make some honor system handshake deals of, we're installing your entire platform, which usually has this cost, but you're going to give us a deal and we're going to agree to only build this much in there.
Sure.
And we'll agree to a regular review, even though we've got your full suite installed, but we're only going to roll it out at this capability. And if we start to see adoption, that we'll ramp up our pricing there. So licensing has been a problem, but I feel like it's getting more flexible, and it's becoming much more manageable, where you can do the per usage or per connector, and not just you have Office 365 or you don't. I think we filled in those gaps in the middle a lot with more flexible licensing, and it's still a challenge to find the right fit or the right cost, or if it's the right, if there is a slant that matches what benefit my small business will get out of it, and can we make it make sense? And I've seen some good progress there. So as much as I'd like to rail against licensing, there has been some flexibility turned up, I think, in all the platforms to be able to do that and empower businesses, smaller ones, to.
Yep. No, I agree. Absolutely.
Well, and that's true across, multiple spaces, right? Where you now have the capability to enable certain things for certain users and not things for other users. Again, I'll go back and say I think Salesforce is way ahead of the game on this one, but that's because they grew up from a native cloud environment. We had to do things differently. There was certainly a day where you either paid for the enterprise features or you didn't, and it was all or nothing, right?
Yeah,
and so that definitely has gotten better. But it's still, I think, a balancing act at the smaller end of the spectrum to say, we'd love to take advantage of all the capabilities, but we just can't afford the licensing.
We're seeing the phases inside of Salesforce also with their acquisitions, Slack and Tableau, and trying to get, the main platform is very sliceable as from a licensing perspective, but the new ones that come in take a while to get those. Okay, how do we find the counters to be able to say, how do you buy part of Slack? Tableau not necessarily was a big all in or not in. And trying to make those, consumable or licensable pieces is an extra level of engineering. So seeing waves of that too, it's interesting, even inside of Salesforce.
So Christina, final thought here. What do you think, or what do you see as the biggest hurdle when you're talking with new customers, and you're in a pre-sales role, so you're getting to them before they've made that decision or they're in the decisioning process, right? And looking to onboarding. What do you see to the greatest hurdle that they have to overcome? Is it their own culture? Is it the learning curve for the tool set? What's holding people back?
Well, I also deal with EA renewals too. So there could be some where, they might have gotten a lot of licenses in their EA renewal, and then they're like, well, we're not using this right now, so we want to bump down our licenses and so on, or, they're new to it. The biggest challenge I see, a lot of it has to do with organizational, it's really security, cybersecurity, or saying, hey, we're not sure if we want to allow this. We don't know. That's the biggest. But I'm dealing with enterprise customers, right? And so I'd say that's what I'm dealing with the majority. Now on medium business, it's more of understanding the tool set, not having the skill sets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Are we doing a better job of bridging that gap with cybersecurity on communicating boundaries and capabilities, or is it still very much two separate areas of concern and we're really not talking to each other?
No, it's both. But this is where I'm doing a lot of sessions to help customers understand. But what was I going to say? The other challenge I see, well, from a training standpoint, let's go back to the no code thing. It was marketed as no code, so some organizations were seeing as Power Platform as a toy.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take it serious,
mm-hmm.
and that I still see that sometimes. But that's why I hate the term no code being used. It's a low code platform and pro code, low code, pro code, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also look at in the beginning, some people started out in Power Platform in the beginning and they're like, we're not going to use this for this organization. We have no way to govern this. But now they have those capabilities. So now I'm having customers come back and say, you know what? We see there's these ALM capabilities now. We see we have these governance controls we can put in place now. So now I want you to educate us so we can put the right stuff in place. So now we can start leveraging the platform. And then they'll work on building champions internally, having us come in, having third-party external partners come out like you and Laura Rogers, train them, have us at Microsoft train them and stuff to educate them. And now what they're looking for is, where do we start? Where do we begin? What do we do?
Are you seeing the tool sets on your side helping that too? I've seen in Salesforce stuff like Digitsec and App Omni that have gotten really good at scanning for vulnerabilities and being able to report back and help with compliance. And they've gained a lot of maturity in the past year that makes it easier to say, oh, sorry.
I'm letting a dog back in. Hang on. He's
Okay.
scratching at the door. Keep going. I'm listening.
Yeah. So it helps you say, if you're concerned about the wheels coming off and people being able to hurt themselves with regards to security and compliance, that you have these other tool sets that can help mitigate those risks. Are you seeing that across? Like I said, I'm seeing it in Salesforce, but I don't know if Microsoft and the other groups have had those same kind of things pop up where things can scan and make sure that you're not doing stuff to hurt yourself and give you the assurance that it's not the Wild West.
Well, I did have a customer recently come back and they had concerns because the creator kit that you install now before the COE starter kit gives you PCF components. And then they had concerns because they're like, wait a minute, PCF components we detect node. We've got code here. Okay, we have concerns. We don't want to allow PCF components. So, and these are coming up on scans saying, we're not sure if we want to allow this. So that's where I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The creator kit actually did become part of the requirement, but you can get rid of these PCF components. So I am seeing that starting to happen now. But it's
Good. Thank you. Yeah.
New.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this particular episode. Big thanks, Christina. Thank you for joining us and doing this. And don't forget, if you want to learn more about this, and this whole concept of Center of Excellence, which I'm going to try and make your session because I really want to see what the components are and how you're putting this together. Christina will be in Dusseldorf at the European Collaboration Summit. You can go to collabsummit.eu and get more information on that. And I will, just like I posted on social media the other day, the cost of the conference plus a flight to Dusseldorf plus a hotel is cheaper than the ticket price for most of the domestic conferences.
Good point.
So don't use the excuse that it's in Germany. That you don't want to come and use that as a plus. It's Germany, right? We're going to have beer and pretzels and spätzle and we're going to have a great time. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll be sure to come and learn more about this concept from Christina, along with all the other content that's going to be there. Quick reminder, I teased this at the beginning. We have 2 new series as part of the Community Cloudcast family. So on the second Thursday of every month, Rob Bogue and I do the Winging It series where we talk about sort of larger topics, but we started with enterprise content management, then we did search, and we'll have some migration content here coming up. So a lot of information architecture and the kind of things that Rob and I are known for. So that's a chat that we have available every second Thursday on the webcast and also on our podcast channel. And then brand new on the 4th Thursday, Mr. McCollum's V.Next series is debuting next week. Paul, give us a quick teaser about what goes on in V.Next.
So we'll be talking and foreshadowing from the conversation earlier, keeping up with new cloud capabilities so that you have all of the multi-cloud tools in your toolkit. So that's we'll try to bring up anything that's new. I will have decent insight into some of the Salesforce stack, and we'll work together to get the other stacks brought up there and bring those into focus as they come out or available and hit any kind of level of maturity. I'm sure Chat GPT will come up, and Bing GPT will be there as two in and out. So
we'll just let you do the whole episode.
Yep.
Don't need us anymore. All right. And of course, a shout out to once again our sponsors at Aptogen. Jason couldn't be with us this month for the recording, but be sure to check out the Bifocal Show with himself and John White and the Salesforce Developers Group. You have a meeting coming up next. So I guess that's technically going to be when this episode airs, which is the third Thursday of each month, the day before you will have had your Salesforce Developers Group.
Yes, I hope everyone will have enjoyed my meeting.
by the time they see this, but be sure to check out the Dallas Salesforce Developers Group, which you can get on Trailblazer for community events in Salesforce. Sign up for that. I just got a notification of a new one coming up, so I could jump in and register for that. And you're doing it hybrid, right? It's in person, and you can also join virtually.
Yep, I'm trying to keep the Zoom going too, and we're doing our big kind of charity requirements gathering session and making it kind of educational this coming Wednesday. But hopefully that'll be fun. But that big charity developer lock-in that we'll be doing, or stand-up lock-in we'll be doing, is coming up in a couple of weeks.
So all of which will have happened by the time this episode actually.
The pre-meeting will have happened, but hopefully the event is actually slated for March 5th. So it should be an interesting. We're doing an org stand-up for a local nonprofit group. So we're going to build out, with basically locally crowdsourcing, building out an entire environment for them.
Very cool stuff. Right. Well, everyone, that's it. All we have. If you miss us on the webcast on our YouTube or Facebook, of course, you can join us on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. All of our content is available to airs the same time as our episodes air normally. So be sure to check that out. You can go to communitycloudcast.org for a list of all of our episodes and all the links. One more time, a big thank you to Christina Wheeler being our special guest.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to seeing all of you next month.